any threat to democracy when he was in the White House. And I would actually
coup of the country.
Well, that you can argue that a lot of different ways. Peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard is not an attempted coup. What was a coup was when they replaced Joe Biden with Kamala Harris, who was not elected by anyone to run for president. There are 14 million people who voted for Joe Biden to be the nominee for the Democrat Party. And if you want to talk about a real threat to democracy, I would argue that.
That wasn't.
But Laura, did anyone die when that happened, though?
Well, no, not even that.
Well,
she was vice president. So.
The only person who died was a woman who was there actually very supportive of Donald Trump on that day.
That's still a life loss. I'm just saying
it's terrible.
The comparison is a bit.
We could go down the line of people dying in a lot of different circumstances, and I would argue that list could get very long for the Democrats as well. But
we're going to get into this video of Lara Trump having a conversation with Charlamagne the God and the Breakfast Club. We get into the topics of inflation, of Donald Trump, and talking about the economy and Kamala Harris. Without further ado, let's get into it.
I don't be liking the optics of that. Only reason I say I don't like the optics of that is because when you hear people like Chuck Schumer say things like Trump is a threat to democracy, but then you're sitting next to him yucking it up. Why would you be yucking it up with somebody who you consider a threat to democracy?
Well, you have to ask yourself that question, don't you? Maybe it's all scare tactics. Maybe it's a lot of fear mongering. Charlamagne, what I can tell you is I know Donald Trump. I have known him for 16 years, and Chuck Schumer's known him a lot longer than I have. And I think he knows full well he's not a threat to democracy. And you don't even have to take my word for it. Look at what he did when he was in the White House. Like, there was never any threat to democracy when he was in the White House.
Well,
and I would actually
coup of the country.
Well, that you can argue that a lot of different ways. Peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard is not an attempted coup. What was a coup was when they replaced Joe Biden with Kamala Harris, who was not elected by anyone to run for president. There are 14 million people who voted for Joe Biden to be the nominee for the Democrat Party. And if you want to talk about a real threat to democracy, I would argue that.
That wasn't.
But Laura, did anyone die when that happened, though?
Well, no, not even that.
Well,
she was vice president. So.
The only person who died was a woman who was there actually very supportive of Donald Trump on that day.
That's still a life loss. I'm just saying
it's terrible.
The comparison is a bit.
We could go down the line of people dying in a lot of different circumstances, and I would argue that list could get very long for the Democrats as well. But
she was vice president. She was on the ballot. People did vote for her. The delegates did vote for her at the DNC.
But would you, as I'm going to assume, a Democrat voter for a long time. Unaffiliated voter. If you were a Democrat, maybe a Democrat here, would you guys, if you had the option to vote for someone other than Joe Biden to be the representative for you on the Democrat ticket, have chosen Kamala Harris to be that person?
Yeah, I would have chosen Kamala Harris.
Out of every...
That is nothing more than a complete lie. They're just complete liars. How is it that... And this is what I call a lie by de facto. How is it that what they're doing in this particular situation is a lie by de facto, which I call it, is a highly probable and unprovable statement that somebody makes that's most likely untrue? Okay, none of these individuals were supporting and going for Kamala Harris when she was running for president in 2020 for the presidential Democratic nominee. Now, all of a sudden, she's awesome, she's great, she's a votable candidate, I would have voted for her. Yes, all of these are just lies. It's complete nonsense. Okay, like Joe Rogan said, the human fragility to just be so malleable to forget what we've known to always be true is complete insanity. Okay, let's go ahead and look at this chart here. Look at this chart here. This is the amount of delegates that were given during the 2020 election based when these individuals were running for the Democratic nominee. Biden won the nominee and was the presumptive nominee for the Democratic Party. And the numbers go proceeding. Kamala Harris is nowhere on here. Okay? Where do you see her? Nowhere. 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 Nobody was voting for her. It's an absolute lie. The only fact about this that I will say is pretty decent is the fact that Charlamagne the God did stand up and say that he didn't like the fact that one moment you're saying I'm a threat to democracy and the next minute we're chucking it up and we're friends and we're cool. Because at the end of the day, there is a huge problem with that. I would absolutely agree.
Yes. I mean, I was a person that was calling for Joe Biden to step down for a very long time. And I think that there's, when Joe Biden made a statement last year, he said there's about 50 of us that can beat Donald Trump. I was like, well, line them all up then. And I definitely had her as one of the people.
Even though she dropped out whenever she ran the first time before her home state voted, before Iowa, and she was polling solo, you still would have given her the shot. And I mean, if you think back to Kamala Harris, when Joe Biden, before he got pushed out of this position, before he really kind of took it up a notch with this campaign, people were saying Kamala Harris is the insurance policy for Joe Biden because she really is not doing a great job as vice president. I mean, she got,
Well, I'm a person who voted. I voted for that ticket because of her.
Interesting.
Yeah.
A lot of people did.
Yeah. Well, we've got.
No, you didn't. You're just lying. You're just a big fat liar. None of you voted for Joe Biden because of Kamala Harris. You voted for Joe Biden not because you're voting for him. You voted for Joe Biden because you were voting against Trump, like a majority of the voters. Let's look at the data. Okay? This article here on 538 Politics, when Kamala Harris became the presumptive vice president for Joe Biden, okay? This article showed that research suggests that the electoral impact of the vice president is fairly limited, okay? We know that with this current election. And it was expected that Harris was going to follow the same pattern. She was a sitting senator, okay? And she participated in the 2020 Democratic primary process, okay? While she didn't make huge gaffes like Biden, whatever, she makes huge gaffes now. But I digress. Having a senator from California on the ticket swayed nothing for a Democratic nominee. That is what this is saying here. It was not particularly effective. Also, at the same time, okay, this had no impact on Biden, who keeps the current lead for presidency against Trump. So the fact that Kamala Harris had factors that helped Joe Biden for his presidential run was null. 0 to null. As we continue, let's listen to Laura now answer the question by Charlamagne about Trump previously running for president and what he learned. Let's go to that.
And it didn't go very far from my memory. I don't know that there was any official announcement as far as I know. But look, I think he felt the right time was 2016. I think he looked at what was going on. And this is a businessman. And I think a lot of what he did that was very beneficial to this country has to do with businesses, with the economy, with jobs. Those were things that were really important to him. And you hear him talk about it now. He recently was talking about tariffs and how he wants to apply tariffs to countries who are, it's really awful to see how so many jobs, factories have gone overseas. We want to see made in the USA on more. And you saw that happening when he was in the White House. You saw more people employed in this country than we've ever had employed in the history of America. You had more money in your pocket and inflation at 1.9%. It was a very different feeling when he was in the White House. And I think that's why you're seeing such great support for this man. You don't have to love everything he says. You don't have to love everything he posts on X or Truth Social or whatever. But you do have to be honest that your life probably felt a lot better with Donald Trump in the White House. And I think that that's one of the reasons that he's working so hard, because he knows he can do the job. He did it one time before.
Question: why are tariffs considered good business when you know that it's going to cause the cost of typical American household items to go up significantly?
He explained
like a bunch of economists say that it'll cost the average American $2,600 extra a year.
I think that.
So first of all, this is not true. There might be a slight tip, and it might be is a generous statement. Okay, economists are not that good, to be honest. Economists are like therapists. If you go to a therapist, they'll be a good listener, but as far as giving you the tools and techniques to overcome your issues, they're probably not going to be able to do that. If you have severe mental illnesses and or mental problems, you probably shouldn't go to a therapist. You probably shouldn't go to a psychologist. You should probably go to a psychiatrist if you have real severe issues, because a therapist doesn't have that much training. They're not that deeply entwined into having compassion about what they're doing at the level that an expert would. And I'm not attacking them, but most of them are just average at best, which most people are at their job, average at best. But somebody who's a psychiatrist who's average at best is still going to be able to help you who's going to have severe issues. An economist doesn't have tremendous amounts of understanding when it comes to the market that you think they should. Okay, typically only a handful of economists are actually good. Okay, Trump has gone over this multiple times, and tariffs are going to be set to a level that's high enough to where the countries immediately have to respond and a deal and or bring the prices of their particular trade negotiations to a level that's feasible to America, because a lot of them haven't been paying and a lot of them haven't been doing what they were supposed to be doing. And then at the same time, it will bring jobs back to America, because Trump has already gone over that with companies that said the tariffs are too high, we can't do business. And this is how he handles it.
Term of second year, I get a call, and they say Tim Cook's on the phone. He calls. He said, "Could I see you, sir?" He's the head of Apple. And I was born in Queens, and I said, "Oh, the head of Apple wants to see me. Let's go." I guess even though I'm president, still I was born in Queens, and the head of Apple's calling, and by that time it was the largest company in the world. It's the largest.
Sure, yeah.
In terms of value at that time, I don't know what it is now, but it was. So he comes in to see me, and it was about tariffs. He said, "You're charging us 25% because I was going to charge them because we're out of China, and the problem is we can't compete with Samsung because they didn't have to pay tariffs because they weren't in China and they were in South Korea." And he said, "It's not really possible for me." And I did waivers, standard waivers. "It's not possible for me to compete with them if I have to pay a tax and they don't to get our product into the United States." I said, "I agree with you." It didn't take long. I mean, I sort of got it, right? And
so what happened as a result of this is Trump gave Apple a waiver. He understands business. He's the perfect person to be in this position. He is a businessman. Issue of inflation. Biden's inflation has gone through the roof. Okay. As we see here in the data, last few months when Trump was president, we had record low inflation. Okay. Between 1 and 1.5%. I've even seen before where it was 1% and even lower throughout the course of his presidency. Okay, 18 months after Biden became president, inflation was over 9%. 9%, according to the data here. And the data here explicitly says Biden did not inherit any inflation from Donald Trump. Okay? So, Charlamagne the God continues on by telling Laura that Biden has brought inflation down to 2.5. Who cares? 2.5 is still considered high compared to a Trump economy. Okay? Trump had gas under $2. Okay? Biden had gas up to over $4. Now gas is just under $3. And he talks about how Biden has drilled more than Trump. It doesn't matter. Gas is still higher than it was with Trump. Inflation is still higher than it was for Trump. You can't do terrible and do terrible and do terrible, and then somehow at the end of the race, the last lap that you did was excellent, but the other 5 laps that you did were terrible, and think that we're going to say you had a great race. No, your race is terrible. Listen, I hope you enjoyed this video, my breakdown of Lara Trump and Charlamagne the God on The Breakfast Club. I actually have another video on this, which is way more juicier than this is, when breaking down the conversation and a particular isolated situation that they had on that particular show. You can go watch that video. Hopefully it's out by now or it's coming out soon. But nevertheless, stick around, watch more of my videos. I have another podcast coming up with me and Raw Rooks. Hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you like and subscribe. Don't forget, I'm Mr. Rembrandt, and this is Mr. Rembrandt. See you on the next video.